Kohaloyim Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Wahara Kakwadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, rule well. Shalom and salutation to you brothers out here, pushing the words of truth and sincerity. Shalom to the elect Akim and Aqua of Shalom. I'm starting to make way more correlations between America and Rome these days and see it for myself. And I thought this was a great correlation, proving that America is the final leg of the Roman Empire. Now check this out. We all pretty familiar with this story, but did you see the recent news? Check the title out and listen to the clip.
New information into the kidnapping of several Americans in Mexico. ABC News has learned 5 Gulf Cartel members have been detained after leaving an apology note and a photo of themselves. The remains of the 2 Americans killed, Shide Woodard and Lizindell Brown, are expected to be returned to the U.S. today for further autopsies. The group was traveling from South Carolina to Matamoros, so one of them could cross the border and have cosmetic surgery. Authorities also now saying that a 5th person was traveling with them initially, but did not cross the border.
Watch breaking news on YouTube. Subscribe to ABC7 Chicago Eyewitness.
Yeah, so you heard that right. And this, I'm scratching my head. The cartels are apologizing about the murders. What country do you think these people belong to where cartels are apologizing for the murder of 4 Jakes? Here we go with the article. Cartels suspected of American kidnappings. You see this keyword here? American kidnappings. There's only one thing that got these people plastered over the TV, and cartels apologizing. These is cartels. They murder every day. They murder for their Roman Catholic saints. What would make them apologize for these 4? This word right here, America. Now I'm about to correlate it with the scriptures. If you got any idea where I'm going with, then you a bad dude. It says the cartel believed responsible for the armed kidnapping last week that killed 2 American tourists. That's the key word, American. See, they ain't come from Nigeria. They came from America. They ain't come from Zimbabwe. They came from America. If they came from Jamaica, it might have not even been. They came from America. Show you something. The cartel believes responsible for the armed kidnapping last week that killed 2 American tourists and a Mexican woman in Matamoros, Mexico, issued an apology letter and handed over 5 of their members to the local authorities. They even turned over their own members to the authorities with apology letter. According to the images circulating online in a version of the letter obtained by CNN from an official familiar with the ongoing investigation, the Gulf Cartel. Who's the Gulf Cartel? Now we gotta check these dudes out. Are these the real deals or some fly-by-night guys? Look at the Gulf Cartel, man. These the real deal. El Cos. El Cos will have you and your family hogtied and... Alright? And dead suddenly. These ain't no your average guys, man. These are the ones that go to war with the governments in Mexico. These is the Issacharites that's locos. Okay? Los locos right here. Beheading is nothing to them. CTG. You see what I'm saying? What got them apologizing to the Society of Matamoros, the relatives of Miss Areli, and the affected American people and families. Why? Because they affected America. So, without further ado, in the book of Acts 22 and 24, it says, Paul reveals his Roman citizenship. That's the title here. Paul reveals his Roman citizenship. Let's see what happens when Paul reveals his Roman citizenship. It says the commander brought Paul inside and ordered. This is in the NLT, by the way. I proofread both. The commander brought Paul inside and ordered him lashed with whips to make him confess his crime. He wanted to find out why the crowd had become so furious. When they tied Paul down to lash him, Paul said to the officer standing there, "Is it legal for you to whip a Roman citizen who hasn't even been tried?" The officer heard this. He went to the commander and asked, "What are you doing? This man is a Roman citizen." The cartel believed responsible for the armed kidnapping last week that killed 2 American tourists and a Mexican woman in Matamoros, Mexico, issued an apology letter and handed over 5 of their members to the local authorities, according to images circulating online. Acts 22 and 26 again. When the officer heard this, he went to the commander and asked, "What are you doing? This man is a Roman citizen." So the commander went over and asked Paul, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" "Yes, I certainly am," Paul replied. "I am too," the commander muttered, "and it cost me plenty." Paul answered, "But I am a citizen by birth." The soldiers who were about to interrogate Paul quickly withdrew when they heard he was a Roman citizen, and the commander was frightened because he had ordered him bound and whipped. The Gulf Cartel apologizes to the Society of Matamoros, the relatives of Miss Areli, and the affected American people and families. Reads the handwritten letter referring to a Mexican woman who was also killed in the shootout. 2 other American tourists survived the kidnappings. In one of the photos posted online, 5 men can be seen lying face down and restrained on the pavement with their shirts pulled over their faces. Uniformed authorities are seen standing over them. The Gulf Cartel Scorpion Group strongly condemns the events of last Friday, the letter continues, referring to a division of the cartel. For this reason, we decided to hand over those directly involved and responsible for the acts, who at all times acted under their own determination and indiscipline and against the rules in which the Gulf Cartel always operates. Rules for the Gulf Cartel? Oh, like never kidnap an American tourist. In Acts 22 and 24, when you go into cross references, it makes a great point here. Can you see that? Just dealing with the chief. It says here, as the chief captain did not understand Hebrew, he was ignorant of the charge against Paul, and also of the defense which the apostles had made. But as he saw that they grew more and more outrageous, he supposed that Paul must have given them the highest provocation, and therefore, according to the barbarous and irrational practice in which has existed in all countries, he determined to put him to the torture in order to make him confess his crimes. Next part. Verse 25 in the KJV, as they bound him with thongs, which means tied him down, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? You go down into the cross references, it says here, by the Roman law, no magistrate was allowed to punish a Roman citizen capitally or by inflicting stripes or even binding him. In the single expression, I am a Roman citizen, arrested their severest decrees and obtained, if not an escape, at least a delay of his punishment. So being that Paul said those famous words, I am a Roman citizen, they had to stop immediately from what they were going to do, no matter who said what they was going to do. A magistrate was not allowed to punish a Roman citizen. Thus, in today's world, modern day Rome, no cartel member, doesn't matter if you were part of the Scorpion group or not, it is against the policy or the rules of the cartels to condemn, bind, tie up, hurt an American tourist, no matter how they look. These are all American citizens. That's why the Gulf had to apologize and then hand over its members. And it happened again in Acts 16. You could see the title, Paul and Silas in prison. Now watch this. You go down to verse 29. The jailer called for lights and ran to the dungeon and fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. Then he brought them out and asked, Sirs, what must I do to be saved? They replied, believe in the Lord Yahushua and you will be saved along with everyone in your household. Let me jump all the way down now. Verse 37, straight to the point. But Paul replied, let me start at 35. The next morning, the city officials sent the police to tell the jailer, let those men go. So the jailer told Paul, the city officials have said, you and Silas are free to leave. Go in peace. But Paul replied, they have publicly beaten us without a trial and put us in prison, and we are Roman citizens. See, Paul again is applying his wisdom, his wits, his smarts in understanding Roman law. He is a Roman citizen. A magistrate cannot maim, you cannot beat, you cannot scourge, you cannot whip, you cannot bind, you cannot imprison a Roman citizen. And at the point in which somebody reveals that they are a Roman citizen, you need to stop what you're doing and let that man free. Paul knew that. Paul knows that. He's hiding behind the power that's involved, called the force to be reckoned with, called the Roman Empire. The same force that is to be reckoned with, while a cartel will give up 5 of its own for something that they do on a regular, only because they dealt this time. They made a sincere, sorry mistake in messing with an American citizen. No matter if it's the bottom of the barrel, you know, these 4 Israelites not even considered in America, you know. They'll look though, you know, we're at the bottom of the barrel, Israelites. But here it is, because the cartels moved on American and they had that American citizenship, they are now apologizing openly, putting their own members to a shame. This is what Paul knew about Rome. You couldn't just run down on Paul, a Roman citizen. He says, but Paul replied, they had publicly beaten us without a trial and put us in prison. And we are Roman citizens. So now they want us to leave secretly? Certainly not. Let them come themselves to release us. Listen to Paul. Listen to his fierceness. Listen to what he talking about. He knows the law. He know. That's like saying, y'all done fucked up. Nah. When the police reported this, the city officials were alarmed to learn that Paul and Silas were Roman citizens. So they came to the jail and apologized to them. You see? Apologize to the Romans. Apologize to the modern day Romans, Americans, for what you're doing to his citizens. Do you know the threat involved with doing something to a Roman citizen during the time of Rome? Do you know the threat involved doing something to an American citizen during the Pax Americana, the rule and reign and global hierarchy and dominance, military force that is the American government that can in one instant shut down any cartel outside of the border, wage war on the whole entire country? It goes on. So they came to the jail and apologized to them. Then they brought them out and begged them to leave the city. When Paul and Silas left the prison, they returned to the home of Lydia. There's more. There's another great example of Paul understanding Roman law in Acts, the 25th chapter. The entire chapter goes into it. You learn a little bit about some notable figures like Festus here and King Agrippa. But Acts 25:1, the title says Paul appears before Festus. And this is in the NLT to make it a little clearer. It says 3 days after Festus arrived in Caesarea to take over his new responsibilities, he left for Jerusalem. And as a matter of fact, yeah, let's keep reading. Now, actually, when you go into the cross-reference, it gives a little important dialogue here. And it says, by the province, Judea is meant. By the province, because in that KJV it says, now when Festus was coming to the province. So Judea is meant. For after the death of Herod Agrippa, Claudius thought it imprudent to trust the government into the hands of his son Agrippa, who was then but 17 years of age, and therefore Caspius Fadus was sent to be procurator. It says, and when afterwards Claudius had given to Agrippa the tetrarchy of Philip, he nevertheless kept the province of Judea in his own hands, and governed it by procurators sent from Rome. So this sounds a lot like America, where you have governors, senators, congressmen, mayors. It's a whole bunch of different orders amongst the group, right? I digress. Let's continue, because it gets good. Where the leading priests and other Jewish leaders met with him and made their accusations against Paul. They asked Festus, so they're asking Festus, right? And who is Festus? Was he a Hebrew Israelite? Was he another Israelite? Who is he? The successor of Felix as procurator of Judea. Festus, a Roman. You see here, a Roman. Okay? Festus.
Strong's G 5347. Festus.
Okay. Successor to Felix. 60 AD. All right. He was a Roman. Let's continue. It says 3 days after Festus arrived in Caesarea to take over his new responsibilities, he left for Jerusalem, where the leading priests and other Jewish leaders met with him and made their accusations against Paul. They asked Festus as a favor to transfer Paul to Jerusalem, planning to ambush and kill him on the way. But Festus replied that Paul was at Caesarea and he himself would be returning there soon. And so those of you in authority can return with me. If Paul has done anything wrong, you can make your accusations. About 8 or 10 days later, Festus returned to Caesarea, and on the following day he took his seat in court and ordered that Paul be brought in. When Paul arrived, the Jewish leaders from Jerusalem gathered around and made many serious accusations they couldn't prove. Paul denied the charges. I am not guilty of any crime against the Jewish laws or the temple or the Roman government. So Paul knows exactly the laws of his people, the laws of the Israelites. He understood the laws of the temple. He understood the laws of the Roman government. Let's see something here. Right? You can see in the KJV, the laws of the Jews, neither against the temple, nor yet against Caesar I have offended anything at all. So there it is. Let's keep reading. And Festus, wanting to please the Jews, asked him, are you willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there? But Paul replied, no, this is the official Roman court, so I ought to be tried right here. Yo, Paul, man. He says, you know very well I am not guilty of harming the Jews. If I have done something worthy of death, I don't refuse to die. But if I am innocent, no one has a right to turn me over to these men to kill me. I appeal to Caesar. Yo, you understand how Paul knew what he was doing? Let's read this. Appeal. It says here, an appeal to the emperor was a right of a Roman citizen and was highly respected. So couldn't nobody just kill you? Couldn't no Jews run down on you unless they was zealots? But couldn't no council, no, high priest even, he had to go to the procurator. He had to get Rome's approval. Hence you had Pontius Pilate in the time of Yahushua during this very time. An appeal to the emperor was the right of a Roman citizen and was highly respected. The Julian law condemned those magistrates and others as violators of the public peace who had put to death, tortured, scourged, imprisoned, or condemned any Roman citizen who had appealed to Caesar. Meaning I asked Rome and the Council of Rome and Caesar to plead my case in front of Caesar, not in front of these Jews. This law was so sacred and imperative that in the persecution under Trajan, Pliny would not attempt to be put to death, and Pliny would not attempt to put to death Roman citizens who were proved to have turned Christians, but determined to send them to Rome, probably because they had appealed. Man, you had to be sent to Rome. You had to be sent to Rome, and that's probably some history that we should go into. Trajan, Pliny, and Roman citizens that turned Christian. All right, for another time. Let's continue. So Paul wants to appeal to Caesar. Verse 12, Festus conferred with his advisors and then replied, very well, you have appealed to Caesar, and to Caesar you will go. There it is, just like that. And a few days later, that's why I believe, in the scripture where Paul speaks of, they have taken me out of the mouth of the lion, or something along them lines. Out of them I have been saved from the mouth of the lion. I believe he was speaking of being taken out of when he appealed, and might have been even before Caesar, and instead of sentencing him to death, like he had let him go or something along them lines, he might have been in front of Nero, if I'm not mistaken. Just continuing now. I mean, but that's just based on commentary. There's more to look into that, It says, a few days later, King Agrippa arrived with his sister Bernice to pay their respects to Festus. During their stay of several days, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. There is a prisoner here, he told him, whose case was left for me by Felix. When I was in Jerusalem, the leading priests and Jewish elders pressed charges against him and asked me to condemn him. So you see, they're going to go to the judge on you. They're going to go to the American courts on you. Some of your closest, they did that to Paul. They knew Paul, but they knew they had to go to the Americans. Same with today. A lot of people, all of this backbiting these other camps is doing towards GMS, and they really trying to get us hemmed up when they making false accusations, especially those that are criminal false accusations. You trying to get us hemmed up. You already know FBI's, whoever, in what we're labeled out here. You already know what we're labeled, how we're being watched. Hate groups being watched and tracked according to that Southern Poverty Law Center. You already know that. And now you're going to give more reason to that by stating false accusations that are criminal, showing you that nothing has changed since the times of Festus, Felix, King Agrippa. Let's continue up. Verse 16, I pointed out to them that Roman law does not convict people without a trial. Sorry, I jumped. Verse 14, 15, when I was in Jerusalem, the leading priests and Jewish elders pressed charges against him and asked me to condemn him. Yeah, I was in the right place. 16, I pointed out to them that Roman law does not convict people without a trial. That's the point. Now, who else doesn't convict people without a trial? I'm sure if you go to Kathmandu, wherever that is, you can die without a trial. You might die on the spot. Go to Bangladesh and see if they don't serve you. Go to Haiti, see if you don't get served. But in America, USA, just like Roman law, they got laws set up and established, and you're supposed to get a trial, whether it's speedy trial, judged by 12, that type of deal. Same with Rome. It says they must be given an opportunity to confront their accusers and defend themselves. When his accusers came for the trial, I didn't delay. I called the case the very next day and ordered Paul brought in. The accusations made against him weren't any of the crimes I expected. Instead, it was something about their religion and a dead man named... Yo, do you see? Festus was not an Israelite, man. He was a heathen. He was a heathen. He didn't even understand what they was talking about when they accused him. He said something about their religion and a dead man named Yahushua, who Paul insists is alive. He's like, what are they talking about, man? I was at a loss to know how to investigate these things. And this is why we can't teach Yahushua to the nations outside of Israel, because they don't believe in, it's just a dead man to them. Yahushua is a dead man to them. They don't believe in his resurrection, and he through him, he's the atonement. They don't understand atonement. The law wasn't given unto them. It was given unto Israel. It's not for them. Trying to beat a dead horse and getting the nations to understand who we are. It's not for them. Verse 20, where am I? 20. I was at a loss to know how to investigate these things, so I asked him whether he would be willing to stand trial on these charges in Jerusalem. So he didn't know. He was just going to send him to Jerusalem. But Paul appealed to have his case decided by the emperor, because Paul was too smart for that. They would have served him on the way to Jerusalem. So I ordered that he be held in custody until I could arrange to send him to Caesar. I'd like to hear the man myself, Agrippa said, and Festus replied, you will, tomorrow. Paul speaks to Agrippa. So the next day, Agrippa and Bernice arrived at the auditorium with great pomp, accompanied by military officers and prominent men of the city. Festus ordered that Paul be brought in. Then Festus said, King Agrippa and all who are here, this is the man whose death is demanded by all the Jews, both here and in Jerusalem. But in my opinion, he has done nothing deserving death. Why? Because even the heathen was more considerate at that point in time than the high priest from Jerusalem and of those that wanted to kill Paul. I forget what they call them, the Jewish leaders from Jerusalem. They were more ruthless than Festus, the procurator, the Roman. Israelites more ruthless than Romans. Imagine that. It says, but in my opinion, he has done nothing deserving of death. However, since he appealed to his case to the emperor, I have decided to send him to Rome. But what shall I write the emperor? For there is no clear charge against him. So I have brought him before all of you, and especially you, King Agrippa, so that after we examine him, I might have something to write. For it makes no sense to send a prisoner to the emperor without specifying the charges against him. I was going to end it here, but I did not got to get inside the next. And we know how that story goes. But yet and still, let's continue. Acts 26:1. Then Agrippa said to Paul, you may speak in your defense. So Paul, gesturing with his hand, started his defense. I am fortunate, King Agrippa, that you are the one hearing my defense today against all these accusations made by the Jewish leaders. For I know you are an expert on all Jewish customs and controversies. Now please listen to me patiently. As the Jewish leaders are well aware, I was given a thorough Jewish training from my earliest childhood among my own people in Jerusalem. If they would admit, they know that I had been a member of the Pharisees, the strictest sect of our religion. Now I am on trial because of my hope in the fulfillment of Yahweh's promise made by our ancestors. In fact, that is why the 12 tribes of Israel zealously worship Yahweh night and day, and they share the same hope I have. Yet, Your Majesty, they accuse me for having this hope. Why does it seem incredible to any of you that Yahweh can raise the dead? I used to believe that I ought to do everything I could to oppose the very name of Yahushua of the Nazarene. Indeed, I did just that. And this is where we went earlier into the other portion, by the way. I believe this is what I brought out earlier. But let's continue for the sake of just getting it out. Indeed, I did just that. In Jerusalem, authorized by the leading priests, I caused many believers there to be sent to prison, and I cast my vote against them when they were condemned to death. Many times I had them punished in the synagogues to get them to curse Yahushua. I was so violently opposed to them that I even chased them down in foreign cities. One day I was on such a mission to Damascus, armed with the authority and the commission of the leading priests. About noon, Your Majesty, as I was on the road, a light from heaven brighter than the sun shone down on me and my companions. We all fell down, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, right? We know that when you go into the KJV, it says, I heard a voice speaking unto me and saying in the Hebrew tongue. All right. This is Hebrew, Yahushua speaking. Saul, Saul, why persecutest me? Is it useless for you to fight against my will? And the KJV says to kick against the pricks, right? We understand that's what it means, to fight against the Lord's will. Pricks is, something that you cannot, you're just going to destroy your foot by, quote unquote, kicking against the pricks. As you can see here, against the pricks. And I do want to just bring out what pricks mean. Let's see. Against the gold it has here. Let's see. Pricks, prick, sting, a center, a point, a prick, a sting, a goad, an iron goad for urging oxen, horses, and other. Right, you know what a goad is. Kick against the goad means to offer vain and perilous or ruinous resistance. Why? Because it ruins you, all right, to do something that's against the Heavenly Father's will. You're ruined. You're kicking against the pricks, all right? Something that is used to, it's just a proverb. Kick against the pricks, all right? Moving forward in the lesson, if you're still here, it says, "Who are you, Lord?" I asked, and the Lord replied, "I am Yahushua. Then the one you are persecuting. Now get to your feet, for I have appeared to you to appoint you as my servant and witness. You are to tell the world that you have been, what you have seen, and what I will show you in the future. And I will rescue you from both your own peoples and Gentiles. Yes, I am sending you to the Gentiles to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to Yahweh. Then they will receive forgiveness for their sins and be given a place among Yahweh's people who are set apart by faith in me." So King Agrippa, I obeyed that vision from heaven. I preached first to those in Damascus, then in Jerusalem, and throughout all Judea, and also to the Gentiles, and that all must repent of their sins and turn to Yahweh and prove they have changed by the good things they do. Some Jews arrested me in the temple for preaching this, and they tried to kill me. But Yahweh has protected me right up to this present time, so I can testify to everyone, from the least to the greatest. I teach nothing except what the prophets and Moses said would happen, that the Messiah would suffer and be the first to rise from the dead, and in this way announce Yahweh's light to the Jews and Gentiles alike. Gentiles being Israelite foreigners. We understand that. Hellenistes, all right, Greek-speaking Jew, look it up. Suddenly, Festus shouted, "Paul, you are insane. Too much study has made you crazy." You've heard that word before, right? That sentence, right? I forget their name already, man. Really, honestly, WFI, Wi-Fi. Y'all quoted Festus? Okay, cool. But Paul replied, "I am not insane, most excellent Festus." Was Paul insane? No, he wasn't. What I am saying is the sober truth, and King Agrippa knows about these things. I speak boldly, for I am sure these events are all familiar to him, for they are not done in a corner. King Agrippa, do you believe the prophets? I know you do. He says, I know you do. Let me see something real quick. Making sure. Yep. It says, I know that thou believest. All right. Let's keep going. Agrippa interrupted him. Do you think you can persuade me to become Christian so quickly? Paul replied, whether quickly or not, I pray that both you and everyone here in this audience might become the same as I am, except for these chains, right? And they will be. Guess what? In the kingdom of heaven, all nations is going to have to believe and bow the knee, right? But we know Paul was in dire straits, in chains, and he was using subtlety. That's why he didn't want to go plead his case in Jerusalem, where Yahushua was crucified, lest he would be crucified. They would have killed him on the way there. Then the king, the governor, Bernice, and all others stood and left. And they went out and talked it over and agreed this man hasn't done anything to deserve death or imprisonment. And Agrippa said to Festus he could have been set free if he hadn't appealed to Caesar. Last scripture, Matthew 10 and 16. Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves, but beware of men, for they will deliver you up to these councils, and they will scourge you in their synagogues, and ye shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake. Right? Didn't Paul have to go through that? Won't we have to go through this? For a testimony against them and the Gentiles, but when they deliver you up, take no thought how or what ye shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour which ye shall speak. For it is not ye that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaketh in you. Hey, I'm just going to leave it there. Call Loyam Yahaba Shem Yahushua. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Muslim rule well over the flock. Shalom and salutations to you brothers out here that's pushing words of truth and sincerity. And shalom to the elect Akim and Akwaf. DTA, blah, blah, blah. Shalom.